In a small coastal village lived a simple and modest girl named Gala. They lived together with her grandfather in a small house nestled at the edge of a sandy spit that curved into the bay. The girl stood on a hill surrounded by fruit trees. Early spring awakened nature, and the steppe was covered in a green haze, while the gardens dressed in white paint delicate attire, like a bride's gown. With each new spring, young Gala was increasingly tormented by a vague premonition of imminent happiness. After all, somewhere out there, happiness must be wandering. Why wouldn't it come here, to the old cherry orchard, to a simple bench where the young, tender Gala yearns, waits, and never gets to meet someone? During Gala's 16th spring, urban artists arrived in the distant regional village. They put up posters well in advance, almost from March 8th, announcing the long-awaited celebration to coincide with the anniversary of a historical figure's birthday that occurred a couple of weeks ago. Girls. Paula Vargas burst into the classroom, her cheeks radiant with excitement. Girls, they finally put up a poster at the club in the nearest city. On Saturday, at 7 in the evening, everyone they promised will come. To the nearest city? The friends were astonished. I told you. Paula dismissed with annoyance. Why are you so silly? To the city, you muffin head. Ah, the girls sighed disappointedly. But we can't afford tickets. That's the point. Paula rejoiced for some reason and even danced something resembling a quadrille near the blackboard. 1, 2, 3, hands up, turn. That's the point, my friends. The concert will be outdoors, in the park. In the Central Park. And no tickets, can you imagine? Free entrance. She continued dancing, twirling around the rows of desks. You'll just have to buy a bus ticket. This amazing news spread throughout the school in 2 minutes. Nobody listened to the lessons properly anymore. Everyone whispered, exchanged notes, formed groups in pairs, who would go with whom, who would invite whom, planned their outfits, dreamed of attention from the opposite sex, and felt disappointed if they didn't have a new dress for the occasion. Gala belonged to the latter. She and her grandfather lived in poverty, mostly subsisting on what they grew themselves, so there was certainly no extra money for clothes. What's the matter, my dear? You look troubled? Grandpa asked during dinner. Nothing, Grandpa, just feeling a bit down. Looks like there will be a storm. Clear skies all the way to the horizon. What storm are you talking about? Grandpa frowned. Seems like you have a storm inside you. Tell me what's on your mind. He raised his voice slightly, don't evade it. Are we strangers to each other? No, of course not, Grandpa. Gala looked into her grandpa's eyes and said plaintively, in the city, the artists are coming on Saturday, and I have nothing to wear to go. Ah, that's what it is. Grandpa smiled, stroking his slightly graying mustache, and his eyes softened. I heard. Everyone's gone crazy about these artists. In the village store, it's all people talk about, the concert. I know, Grandpa, we don't have any money, Gala calmly said. I'll manage without going to the concert. Such deep sorrow reflected in her big blue eyes that it pained Grandpa's heart. The next morning, as usual, Gala got up early, drank milk from the jug, and went to do the chores around the farm. She milked the cow, sent it to the collective herd, fed the pig and chickens, cleaned the yard, and then went back inside to prepare food before school. That's when Grandpa returned. He had gotten up even earlier, fixing and repairing the rotten wattle, chopping sturdy logs. Arnaud, Gala's grandfather, was 59 years old during her youth, and he hoped to marry off his only granddaughter, wait for grandchildren, see Gala's family life, and enjoy playing with her children, and then he could pass away in peace. Come here, my girl, he called her to the far barn, where for centuries a large old chest filled with various odds and ends had stood. Gala obediently went, leaving the skillet with the prepared omelet by the fire. What is it, Grandpa? Here, take this. He handed her a neatly folded burlap sack from the open, cluttered chest. What is it? You'll see when you come back from school, Grandpa replied. Put it away for now. Gala, who didn't receive gifts every day, spent all her lessons on pens and needles. Today was Friday, and the previous evening, many of her classmates had spent their time going through their not-so-lavish wardrobes. But most of them had parents, mothers who tried their best for their daughters. Gala only had Grandpa. Her mother gave birth to her out of wedlock and died from puerperal fever, and many in the village whispered that it was due to shame too. Gala's grandmother didn't outlive her unfortunate daughter by much. And so they remained, just the two of them, Grandpa and the young girl. Arnaud raised his granddaughter with strictness, but loved her with all his heart and was ready to do anything for Gala's happiness. He saw that she would soon come of age, turn 17 in June, and then it would be time to welcome potential suitors. It wouldn't be appropriate for a young girl to wear hand-me-downs, and the young blood couldn't stay in one place when others were having fun. God forbid she gained a reputation as a spinster, then it would be hard to find a good husband. Guided by such thoughts, Grandpa fetched something from the old chest, carefully preserved until the right time. Oh my God! Upon returning home, Gala hurriedly opened the sack and pulled out an incredibly beautiful blue dress, along with silk blue shoes and a matching ribbon. Grandpa, Grandpa! She rushed to the yard. Where did this beauty come from? It belonged to your mother, Grandpa sighed. They made it for her graduation. I thought it would be your turn next year, but apparently it's needed earlier. Thank you, dear Grandpa. Happy Gala hugged her grandpa, and tears of joy trembled on her long eyelashes. All right, the contented grandpa gently stroked her smooth, shiny dark hair. Now go and try it on, maybe you need to hem it. Right away, Gala breathed out and rushed back to her room, almost hopping. The dress fit her perfectly, only a slight beadwork needed some fixing and proper ironing. Meanwhile, Grandpa Arnaud, as the evening descended and all the household chores were finally finished, went beyond the fence to smoke a hand-rolled cigarette before bedtime so that Gala wouldn't breathe in the smoke. Taking his time, he gazed at the darkening blue sky with a distant streak of cumulus clouds on the horizon, exhaling a few streaks of the same blue smoke, quickly carried away by the evening breeze. After repeating this procedure several times, he noticed a figure moving toward him, a woman with a headscarf tied in front, its end sticking out on either side like an owl's ears. Such a manner of wearing a scarf was characteristic of a longtime acquaintance of Arnaud's, and he prepared himself for an inevitable clash. Arnaud, why do you spoil the air? The passing woman smiled with just her lips, tall, still stately, with sharp features. You too, Ursula, the elderly but still strong and vigorous man calmly replied, flicking away the smoked cigarette. Your girl, I suppose, is going to the city tomorrow with the others? The newcomer asked, peering into Arnaud's face curiously. What's it to you? The man raised an annoyed eyebrow. Don't let her go. Instead of answering, Ursula quickly and passionately said, Mark my words, Arnaud, you will regret it. You go on your way, Ursula, Arnaud spoke calmly with an air of disdain. Listen, Arnaud, she came up close to him, lowering her voice, speaking even faster, with a tone that conveyed bitterness, guilt, and a sincere desire to help. You know, people talk, and it's all true. I'm guilty before you, very guilty. In youth and foolishness, you can do anything. But now, nothing can be fixed, you understand? That woman, she said that the curse will hold until there's a male heir in your family, only then the power of her sorcery will end. Stop talking nonsense, Arnaud got angry, go away. And he started to out from the harm's way, but the nimble woman grabbed the sleeve of his shirt. For the love of Christ, forgive me, Arnaud, forgive me. Don't let Gala go to the city, don't let her. I already have 2 souls on my conscience, I don't want to burn in the fiery hell, Arnaud. Help me and your own granddaughter. Ursula was already trembling with sobs, tears streamed down her salty cheeks. Nobody will help you, Ursula, except yourself, Arnaud said sternly, shaking her hand off his clothes. Go away and don't show up in front of me again, or I won't be responsible for myself. I'll tell her myself. Ursula cried out in despair, her face distorted by genuine suffering. Don't you dare. Arnaud threatened. Don't you dare fill the girl's head with this nonsense. And he went behind his waddle, firmly closing the gate. Back in the house, he saw Gala rushing out to meet him in her new blue dress. Beautiful, young, slender, and flexible like a young cherry branch, and the memories surged in his throat. His granddaughter resembled so much their daughter Melania when she was young. Listen, he said to her with a hoarse voice from excitement, let's go to the city together tomorrow. Really, Grandpa? Gala was delighted since she had hardly any friends among her classmates, and the one with whom she had a friendly relationship didn't go to the concert because her father wouldn't allow it. Yes, dear, Grandpa affectionately stroked her shiny black hair. I have some business to attend to there. While you enjoy the concert, I'll go to the savings bank, and then we'll go home together. Thank you. Gala tightly hugged her beloved grandpa and gratefully pressed her cheek against his. Thank you, she repeated softly. They set off early the next day, arriving in the city by lunchtime. Grandpa Arnaud wanted to personally find a comfortable spot for his granddaughter, closer to the summer stage, where she could have a good view and avoid getting crushed in the crowd. They had to endure the scorching heat for hours until the entrance to the fenced-off part of the main city park was opened for all the arriving spectators. But in the end, they were among the first to enter and easily found a great spot in the second row of stands, arranged in a semicircle around the tall wooden stage. Now that his granddaughter was securely settled, Grandpa sighed with relief and agreed to meet her at the central entrance after the concert before he went on to attend to his own business. The performance was already delayed by half an hour, and the audience, tired of waiting, was openly bored. Some got up and left their seats to get water or ice cream, and from behind, in the crowd, those standing behind the seats started to whistle and grumble with dissatisfaction. Gala, filled with anticipation for the unseen spectacle, sat patiently, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The full-bodied woman with dyed white hair and a fancy lace dress sitting next to her had left for a moment to the stall with her friend, asking Gala to keep an eye on our seats. Of course, the girl nodded. I'll tell them these seats are taken, don't worry. Not even 5 minutes passed before a young man, red from the heat, and summer cap and canvas trousers, invaded the empty space without asking for permission. He had a notepad in his hands, and a chewed-up blue pencil was tucked behind his ear. These seats are taken, Gala said timidly. The women went for water. It's fine, the newcomer replied nonchalantly. I won't be long. May I take a short interview with you for the city newspaper? With me? Gala was surprised, blushing deeply. But That's all right, the guy interrupted her mid-sentence. I need the opinion of a simple provincial resident. Without waiting for Gala's consent, he opened his notepad and asked, What's your name? Gala, embarrassed, gave her surname and first name. Where did you come from for this concert? She mentioned the name of her village. Which of the performing artists would you like to see the most? Montero and Gonzalez, the girl smiled, and also Delgado. They have such funny jokes. And now, Galina, tell me, the journalist smiled encouragingly, have you ever dreamed of becoming an actress yourself? You are a very beautiful girl, after all. Gala blushed again from embarrassment and the compliment she received. No, she laughed, that's not for me. All right, the journalist persisted. Then what do you dream of becoming? A veterinarian, Gala smiled. I love animals very much. So, dear viewers, we say goodbye to the charming resident of a small village from the nearby province, Galina Duran, and start broadcasting the festive concert, which is about to begin at the lovely seaside city on the summer stage of the Central City Park for Culture and Recreation. Suddenly, turning sideways, the correspondent spoke loudly and clearly. Startled by the unexpected attention, Gala followed his gaze and only then noticed the movie camera pointed directly at her, mounted on a tall tripod with a long lens. An operator was holding and directing it, and there was a whole film crew nearby. The girl turned from red to pale and nervously clenched the hem of her beautiful dress in her hand. But the correspondent had already moved away from the rows, quickly saying goodbye to her, and the attention of the film crew shifted to the stage, where the concert began a couple of minutes later. Performances of famous artists took place in the second part of the program, while in the first part, to warm up the audience, young but not yet very popular singers, dancers, and conversational genre performers came on stage. The very last one, just before the intermission, told funny stories and even performed short pantomimes. He was a very charming young man with dark red hair named Juan. If there were an award for audience sympathy at this concert, it undoubtedly would have gone to this charming artist. Every joke of his was met with loud laughter, smiles, and thunderous applause, and the audience didn't want to let him leave the stage. Dear spectators, he addressed the open-air audience at the end of his performance. Right now, to cheer you up before the intermission, I will select a few spectators and invite them here, on this stage, to help me quickly set up a very funny scene. Don't worry, comrades, the artist added cheerfully, the roles are very, very simple. So, first of all, we need the King Lich. Come on, I'll cast you in this role. He pointed to a thin and tall man in the third row, who was immediately pushed forward amid loud laughter and cheers from those sitting next to him. Absolutely, a perfect fit, his friend said. Excellent, we already have our Lich. Juan rubbed his hands. Listen, Lich, don't even think about running away. He pointed a finger at the man who was nervously shifting from foot to foot. Now we need a brave hero. Who wants to be the hero, huh? Several hands shot up, and the artist chose a tall and broad-shouldered guy from somewhere in the back rows. In the same way, they invited to the stage the noble dragon, a portly elderly man in a dark shirt, who was immediately handed 2 additional cardboard heads, the firebird, a young woman in a bright red-orange dress, the prison, another woman in a long black knitted dress, the mouse, a little white-browed but brave girl chosen from among the children who raised their hands, the egg, a bald and funny man who indeed looked very much like Humpty Dumpty from Alice in Wonderland, and finally, Excalibur, a guy who got this very fake sword on stage. Well, Juan critically examined his improvised group. It seems that someone is missing. Oh yes, how could I forget? And he made a hilarious face, slapping himself on the forehead with force. We are missing the star of the most important role. So, he carefully looked over the hushed audience. We need a beautiful princess. Are there any volunteers? Dozens of hands shot up. Almost every girl in the audience dreamed of a minute of such glory. But the young comedian didn't rush to make his choice, carefully surveying the eager participants. Finally, he stopped in front of the place where Gala was sitting and reached out, looking right at her. Beauty in the second row, wearing a magnificent blue dress, this role is waiting for you. The spectators sitting around Galena squirmed in their seats, looking at her. Girl, they're talking about you. Come on, why are you sitting there? Galena looked at the artist with immense embarrassment and asked softly, Are you talking to me? Yes, you, the comedian confirmed. Dear audience, help the princess get up on the stage. Galena was literally carried onto the stage. With such eagerness, everyone who could reach her offered a helping hand and cleared the way. Blushing with embarrassment, looking truly enchanting like a fairy tale princess, Galena stood among the other chosen ones and saw in front of her a whole sea of curious and diverse faces. Her head even spun a little with excitement. Juan, as if sensing it, approached her almost closely, took her small hand in his, which was big and warm, unnoticed by the audience, and whispered in her ear, You're simply enchanting. Don't be afraid, it's not difficult. Galena felt as if she was struck by a golden flaming arrow. Her breathing quickened from the hot whisper and the close presence of the handsome artist. Tingles of excitement ran down her spine, like fluttering butterflies settled in her stomach and gradually froze there. Well, let's have a rehearsal now, Juan announced loudly, addressing his actors. Listen carefully, I'll read out your roles' lines. They're very simple, you'll all learn them in a snap. So, let's go. Our Lich says, I'll get you now. And he waves his hand. Give it a try, Robe. Yes, that's great. The tall, thin man named Robe beamed with a satisfied smile at the praise. The brave hero shouts with all his might, Hey, let's go. and demonstrates his amazing biceps to everyone. Yes, like that, excellent, Pedro. In the same manner, the necessary lines and gestures were distributed among the small troop. Galena had to say her lines with a smile every time her role was mentioned. Oh, what a charm! And coyly adjust her hairdo. At this stage, the audience kept clapping their hands from time to time. And when Juan solemnly announced the start of the performance, and he began to recite the verses, and the amateur actors started delivering their lines and acting out their parts, the audience burst into delight. This is how it looked. Here is the castle built by Lich. At this point, the Lich named Robe says, "I'll get you now," and menacingly rolls his eyes and threatens the audience with his hand. And here is the beautiful princess. Galena, overcoming her embarrassment with all her might, spoke her lines and adjusted her hairdo. Who languishes in a gloomy prison? The prison sighed sadly and exclaimed, "Oh my bitter fate!" In the castle built by King Lich. And again, the same words from Lich. An unpretentious scene that resembled an exploding bomb had quite the effect. By the middle of the small performance, even the amateur actors themselves were weeping with laughter, not to mention the audience. With the steady hand of a professional, Juan Parra led his improvised troupe to the finale with the proper resolution about the death of King Lich and the princess being rescued by the brave hero. At intermission, the audience flocked, shaking with laughter and clutching their aching stomachs. Thank you all very much, and I ask you to accept the prizes from our organizers, Juan announced at the end of his performance. Right away, two gracious assistant girls brought out beautiful flower bouquets and commemorative souvenirs for the participants. The biggest and most splendid flower basket, along with something wrapped in rustling paper, Juan Parra personally handed to Galena, saying, "The main prize for the main star. Your applause." And he leaned closer to the girl again and whispered softly, "Your beauty has utterly stunned me. Inside the basket, there's a keepsake specially from me. I'll be waiting for you in the dressing room. Go to the left of the stage, second tent. Please, Gala, don't break my heart." Galena felt her body suddenly heat up and then chill. She could barely make her way down from the stage, surrounded immediately by girls from her class who were talking all at once, squealing with delight, and pledging eternal friendship. Other audience members joined in as well, and the crowd of admirers grew rapidly. Galena's head started to spin, and she felt a creeping nausea. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed her elbow and pulled her through the dense crowd of sweaty bodies and shiny faces. Before she could understand what was happening, she found herself sitting in one of the tents, the very same artistic dressing room Juan mentioned. The person who brought her here nodded to the young artist and left, pulling close the thick fabric that shielded the room from curious eyes. "Please, sit down, my dear." Juan carefully guided Galena to a small, light couch and helped her settle in. "Here, have a drink." A glass with cold soda appeared before her, and she took a sip of the refreshing liquid with relief. The inside of the tent was quite cool, thanks to a large fan that refreshed the stuffy and hot air. "Allow me to say," Juan sat next to her on the couch and came extremely close, "you are the most enchanting girl I've ever seen. Have they ever told you that you look just like Roxolana? Do you know who Roxolana was?" "I think she was Alexander the Great's wife," Galena answered shyly and gave a timid smile. "Bravo! Bravissimo!" Juan responded with enthusiasm. "You are also incredibly intelligent. Of course, legendary Roxolana, the daughter of the Persian king and the beloved wife of the greatest military leader of all times. Gala, Gala. May I call you that?" He gently touched her hand. Galena held her breath and lowered her gaze. "What a beautiful name you have. Just like you. So delicate, so young. Let's meet again. You don't mind, do you? I invite you to a restaurant." "I can't." Galena looked at Juan with a hint of guilt. "We don't live here with Grandpa, we just came for the concert." "Where do you live then?" Juan was curious. "In the village, by the bay." "Right by the seaside?" Juan exclaimed with enthusiasm, and upon receiving a positive answer, he continued with excitement. Fantastic. Tell me, Galena, can we set up tents on that beach of yours? Is there enough space? There's actually plenty of space, the girl smiled slightly mockingly, and the beach belongs to no one. Who would forbid it? Brilliant. Tell me the name of your village, and my colleagues and I will come there and have a night picnic. Juan's excitement grew. Galena was surprised and didn't quite understand why these famous artists would want to visit their village. What could they possibly see there? It's decided, Juan exclaimed. Tomorrow we'll gather and head to your place. We'll build a huge bonfire on the beach, sing songs with a guitar, and listen to the sound of the sea. But tell me, dear Galena, how can we find you there? Our house is the last one after the store, the girl replied, still not believing what was happening, but she wanted to add that her grandfather wouldn't let her go to any night picnics. However, Juan, in his characteristic explosive manner, interrupted her. Enchanting. Simply enchanting. Like in a fairy tale. The last house after the store. Are there any other special signs for this last house? Maybe a number? Yes, Galena blushed with embarrassment at her own foolishness. Number 18. Wait for me, oh young enchantress Gala, Juan said fervently and suddenly leaned in to kiss the tips of her fingers. Galena pulled her hand away as if from a hot iron and instantly turned crimson. But her cavalier seemed not at all bothered by this. Oh, how charmingly bashful you are, he laughed and added with a tender loud whisper, Enchantress, Sylph. And then, almost without pause, he shouted loudly, turning towards the entrance of the tent, making Galena flinch from the unexpectedness of it. Anton. At the call, the man who had accompanied Galena before appeared. Escort our charming guest to her place. And take her basket, so she doesn't strain her soft hands, Juan instructed him. The man, without saying a word, bowed his head, clearly showing complete obedience, and picked up the basket, gesturing widely. Please, madam, Anton said politely. Galena, who had never been addressed as madam before in her life, lowered her gaze again and began to follow, but Juan was not ready to leave her alone. By the exit, he was right by her side, grabbing her shoulder and whispering hotly into her ear, I will think of you all the time, counting the minutes until we meet again. The girl quickly glanced at the city's charming ladies' man, stepped back, and hurriedly followed Anton. The second part of the concert passed for her like a hazy dream. Part of her consciousness understood what was happening as she clapped her hands, laughed, and even shouted bravo to the famous artists alongside everyone else. But simultaneously, with each beat of her heart, Juan's words echoed in her temples, I will think of you all the time, counting the minutes until we meet again, Enchantress, Sylph. She trembled all over as if in fever from the vivid impressions of this wondrous day in the park. In her short life, she had never experienced so many varied emotions as she did in just a few hours on this summer day. When her grandfather returned to her at the end of the concert, he found Galena in complete disarray. Her eyes sparkled, her gaze distant, her speech slow and almost disjointed. What's wrong, my dear? Grandpa Arnaud became worried. Everything is fine, I felt like an actress. Look what they gave me, Galena joyfully showed her basket. And they even filmed me for the show, they said they'll show it on TV soon. Can you believe it, Grandpa? Juan Parra said I'm the most beautiful girl, a sylph. Who is this Juan? Grandpa furrowed his brow. During the long journey home, Galena recounted her daytime adventures to her grandfather in fragments. The only thing she omitted was Juan's recent promise to come to their village. Now, even she found it hard to believe that such an unimaginable event could actually happen. However, she was mistaken. It did happen, and much sooner than she could have imagined. Friends, I've learned about a place on the seaside where no one will bother us, Juan announced triumphantly to his friends, several other young aspiring artists, in the evening after the concert. Remember, we talked about having a night camping right by the Azure Sea when we were driving here? So where is this magical place? His friends asked teasingly. Near the village, Just beyond the city limits, Juan said triumphantly, seeing that this direction meant nothing to his friends, and he explained, "It's an hour and a half drive from here. I've already asked Antonio to find out everything and organize a couple of large tents for us. We just need to buy meat for the barbecue and other necessary provisions. We need to seize the moment. The day after tomorrow, we're heading further, and you know the schedule will be even more hectic then." "Nailed it, Juanito. How did you manage to find out everything so quickly?" one of the friends teased, and they all burst into laughter. That's it. You could have guessed it yourselves. You, Juan, always in your element. Don Juan, watch out, you might overdo it one day." Another friend joked. "Thanks for your concern," Juan said with a slightly offended tone. "But it's part of my artistic image, if you will." He winked playfully at his amused companions. "I think there will be plenty of village girls for all of you too." Early in the morning, the young city artists arrived in a caravan, 2 taxis loaded to the brim. One of the taxi drivers assured them that he knew the way perfectly well and would not disappoint. The road led them to the right place, following the countryside road, looping among fields of sunflowers and corn. Finally, they passed the village, bumping along the country roads under each wheel until they reached the deserted narrow shore. The view from there was breathtaking. On the steep cliff, overlooking the sandy beach, seemed tiny picturesque wooden houses. A wide expanse of shallow sea stretched out, bordered on one side by rocky ridges jutting far into the water and on the other side by reed-filled channels, snaking like narrow green ribbons into the land. What a beauty, they all admired. What a view! They unloaded their belongings, released the taxis, and began setting up their temporary camp. The ever-watchful village boys immediately caught wind that city folks had arrived at the beach and spread the news throughout the village. Nobody was particularly surprised, such things happened occasionally. People from the nearby city and tourists sometimes came to this deserted beach. They even occasionally set up tents, just like today, but it was quite rare. The place was relatively unknown, not everyone could find it. The villagers were indifferent to the holidaymakers, they were free to sit there, after all. The beach was for everyone to enjoy, sunbathing, swimming, or fishing. The only thing the locals disliked was the garbage left behind by the visitors. Occasionally, one of the older villagers would come to explain the necessity of keeping the place clean and ask them to clean up after themselves. The young villagers didn't bother the tourists, they kept their distance and only approached if the city folks asked them for something. Sometimes, such visitors would wander into the village to buy fresh produce, eggs, rabbits, potatoes, vegetables, or fruits from local households. That's why the villagers didn't pay much attention to the arrival of strangers on the shore this time. They thought they would stay for a while and leave, just like the others. The adults didn't even go to look, and for a while, the incognito of the young artists was preserved. Galena, on the other hand, had no idea about the arrival of her acquaintances with her grandfather. News from the outskirts reached them last. So, when she heard a persistent knock in the garden and opened the gate, she was shocked to see yesterday's city artist standing right in front of her. "Ah, there you are, my sylph." Juan greeted her happily. "You've gone quite far. You thought maybe I wouldn't find you." "Please, lower your voice," Galena replied timidly, looking around nervously. "My grandfather might hear us." "Ah, so they keep you locked up here," Juan laughed, undeterred. "It's a shame, outdated practices. Imagine, in our progressive age, hiding such beauty from people." "I better go," blushing deeply, Galena said. "It's good for you to enjoy your vacation." "No," Juan blocked her way, not letting her close the gate. "I didn't make all the effort to get here just for you to run away from me." His tone became serious, his eyes pleading, and his whole appearance conveyed complete despair. "Galena," he proclaimed solemnly, "I am hopelessly in love. Love struck me at first sight. I beg of you, dear Gala, do not deny me this humble request. Come to the beach with us in the evening." "No, no." Galena wanted to leave and even call her grandfather, but Juan, seeing the situation turning this way, grabbed her hand, came close, almost touching, and spoke ardently in a hushed voice. "Gala, how can you resist such a feeling? I know that you also like me, the heart doesn't lie. Come on, think for yourself, what harm can a simple walk on the beach do, huh? I have serious intentions, please, trust me. Think about what awaits you here, in this forgotten village. The most you can achieve here is to marry some tractor driver, bear him a bunch of children, and spend your whole life working as a milkmaid in the collective farm. But with me, you'll become a star of the city's society. With your appearance, you can make it big in the city or even the capital on the first try. I'll help you, I have connections everywhere. Come, when it starts to get dark, we'll talk. I promise I won't touch you. So, what do you say?" "I'll come," Galena barely whispered, mostly to break free from the unwelcome embrace of her unexpected suitor. Her head was spinning somewhere, her legs felt cold, and her temples were pounding like crazy. "That's right. That's my girl," Juan said cheerfully and unexpectedly kissed her on the lips. This turn of events brought about an entirely new, intoxicating feeling to Galena's whole being. It seemed to her that her entire past life was insignificant compared to what this incredibly attractive young man offered her, and a future without him appeared dull, gloomy, and melancholy. "Who's there, Gala?" Grandfather called out, rounding the house and heading towards the gate from the backyard. "Well, go away quickly," Galena whispered to her admirer, and turning around, she loudly replied. "City folks are asking if we sell rabbits. Why are they all drawn to our gate like a magnet?" Her grandfather responded irritably. "Tell them to leave us in peace. I already told them we don't sell rabbits or fruits." Galena closed the gate, nodding and smiling at Juan, and walked back to the house. As the sun started to descend, Galena became more anxious. She had been nervous the entire day, and even her grandfather noticed something was wrong and asked, "My dear, you don't seem yourself, pale, no color in your face. What happened?" "I have a headache," Galena replied, "and I feel a bit chilly." "Could you be getting sick?" Grandfather Arnaud worriedly placed his hand on his granddaughter's forehead. "My goodness, you are burning up. Go to bed." Galena, using her imaginary illness, retreated to her room and firmly closed the door. She did feel feverish, not because of a cold, but from the fever of love. The anticipation of something real, of a different, better life, made her heart race wildly. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips dry and hot, and a sense of some predestined fate hung over her like a sword of Damocles. Her grandfather did come in a few times, bringing herbal tea, a small cup of raspberry jam, feeling her forehead again, and shaking his head disapprovingly before leaving. In the approaching twilight, coming out to take a sip of water, Galena told him, "Grandpa, I'm going to bed. I don't feel well at all. I won't have dinner. Don't come anymore, or I get really scared when the door creaks." All right, the grandfather agreed. "Rest, of course. We'll see each other in the morning. But wake me up if anything happens during the night." Of course, Galena weakly smiled and, taking some water, returned to her room. Sleep was out of the question. What sleep could she possibly have? Waiting for the house to settle down after her grandfather's solitary meal and the creaking floorboards to signify his retreat to his room, she quietly opened her window. She had removed the window latches ahead of time to avoid making noise, and she stealthily slipped out of the house. The backyard, which led straight to the cliff, was a place where no one would venture at this hour, and Galena darted like a gray shadow past the cabbage and potato beds, glided between the lush currant bushes, and made her way to the dark seashore. With a desperate heartbeat, she looked around, yearning with all her soul to find the group of city people quickly before they left without her, and she feared that Juan had grown impatient and left. But everywhere was darkness, offering her no hope, and only on the other side of the bay sparkled the distant lights of the big city. Galena was upset to tears, but suddenly she remembered that beyond the far rocky spit, extending into the bay, there was a small piece of dry land enclosed on all sides by a cove, accessible only by walking through the shallow waters covered in seaweed and marine mud. It was uncomfortable to walk on it, as if her legs were sinking ankle-deep in a sticky swamp and, in some places, up to her calves. However, those who managed to overcome this natural barrier were rewarded with a beautiful secluded spot. The village boys often used this place to smoke quietly without worrying about being discovered by adults, and, of course, lovers often sought refuge here. Sometimes, though, there were amusing situations when a couple arrived at the hidden cove, only to find it already occupied. Then they had to retreat and find another spot for their romantic rendezvous. But Delina's guess turned out to be absolutely correct. Walking along the completely deserted beach at this time, she suddenly spotted a lone figure in the distance sitting on a large piece of driftwood. Her heart skipped a beat, and it pounded even faster. Of course, it was Juan. He was waiting for her, as he had promised, sitting on the smooth piece of driftwood just a few meters from that hidden cove. Seeing the approaching girl, he joyfully jumped up from his spot and rushed towards her. "Myself, you came after all." Warm embraces, passionate kisses, and disconnected, interrupted speeches followed, leaving Delina's head even more dizzy than it already was. Her mind was solely occupied by one person in the entire world. And this person was now saying that he loved her more than life itself, that he would soon take her away from here forever to a big, faraway city where ruby stars burned day and night on tall ancient towers. Life there was entirely different, full of joy and carefree moments, and he would make her his lawful wife there. Then they walked through the shallow waters, wading ankle-deep in mud, stumbling at every step like tipsy revelers, and laughing merrily. Soon, the bright glow of a roaring bonfire came into view, surrounded by a lively and boisterous company. They were grilling kebabs, singing songs to the strumming of a guitar, pouring strong drinks into camping cups, laughing, and cracking jokes. "Meet Galina, myself," Juan introduced his friend to everyone. Greetings and joyful exclamations came from all directions. The newcomers were immediately seated by the fire, handed cups, and served plates with grilled meat. "What's this?" Galina coughed, taking a sip from her cup of throat-burning drink. "It's brandy," Juan chuckled. "You've never even tasted something like this, right?" "I've never seen anything like it, let alone tasted it." Galina waved her hand dismissively and burst into laughter. Inside became so warm and joyful. Maybe it was because of that dreadful tasting brandy, or perhaps it was because of Juan's closeness, who held her close, embracing her by the shoulders, in front of all these people, and didn't show any signs of embarrassment. For Galina, it was undeniable proof of his sincere intentions. When the kebabs were finished, they started singing various songs, some of which were familiar to Galina, and others completely unknown to her. At first, she felt shy and didn't even sing along when everyone joined in singing the choruses. But then she became bolder, got involved, and sang at Juan's insistent requests an old romance she had learned during extra music lessons at her school. Her elderly silver-haired music teacher, Sonora Alvarez, always praised her voice and ear and said she should seriously pursue singing. But how could she do that in the village? And now those lessons came in handy. And after Galina performed one of the many old songs, the traveling performers erupted into such enthusiastic applause that she wanted to sink into the gray, crunching sand beneath her feet. "What a wonderful voice you have," someone among them said. "You should apply to a conservatory. Your range is amazing. You could perform an opera with such a voice." "I'll take her to the capital, and then we'll decide where she'll apply," Juan parried, casting jealous glances at the speaker. "Galina might choose to go into pop music or the theater. With such talent, she can go anywhere." "That's right," the others agreed, observing Galina as if she were an item put up for sale. And there was indeed much to see. Her long, shiny dark hair, carefully braided into two flowing braids down her back, glowed like pure copper near the bright, living flame. Her enormous eyes looked openly and trustingly, like a child's, and that's what made the expression on this very beautiful girl's face seem unearthly, otherworldly. Harmoniously built, slender, flexible, with a perfectly developed figure and flawless skin kissed by a golden sunburn, she truly made a strong impression. The nighttime gathering was in full swing, the company sharing jokes and various stories when Juan pulled Galena aside. "Let's go for a swim." "Swim? Now?" Galena was astonished. "Why not?" Her cavalier objected. "But I don't even have a swimsuit." "Why do we need swimsuits?" Juan laughed. "It's dark anyway, it's as good as blindfolded." "I can't do that," Galena blushed. "It's not right." "We'll figure something out," Juan promised, returned to the campfire, and rummaging through his bags, he pulled out a large, thin towel. "Here, take this, tie it around your neck crisscross, it'll be like a perio." "Like what?" Galena didn't understand the unfamiliar word. "Look," the guy demonstrated to her with a laugh and wrapped the towel right over his clothes. "Awesome!" the girl exclaimed in admiration. Stepping away to a ledge of the rock, she took off her clothes and securely tied the towel around herself. Seeing her, Juan, who was also left only in swim trunks, gasped in admiration. "My God, now you're a true Undine." They entered the dark, gently gliding waves and, holding hands, strolled far from the shore along the endless shallows. "Do you even have any depth here?" Juan asked mockingly. "You might feel like drowning your sorrows, but it turns out there's nowhere to do it." "Don't say that," Galena asked, feeling uncomfortable with his words. "The bay is shallow, of course, but it's not shallow forever, about 1.5 miles or so, and then there's a deeper part. And there's also one other place." "Yes, which one?" Juan became interested. "Come, I'll show you." Galena turned back towards the shore and led her companion. They circled around the rocky spit, waved to those sitting around the campfire from the water, and walked parallel to the narrow strip of land, but in the opposite direction. "Careful, now," Galena was about to warn him but didn't have time. Juan had already stepped forward and unexpectedly for himself, disappeared underwater with his head. Emerging a few seconds later, he playfully, like a sea lion, pulled Galena along, caught her in his arms, and spun her around, creating a real whirlpool. "Ah, caught you, cunning seductress of weary seafarers. Admit it, you wanted to drown me?" "No," the girl laughed as she tried to break free. "I wanted to warn you, but you didn't hear me, so you drowned yourself. There's a deep spot here, and over there, look." She pushed off him easily and swiftly swam away, gliding through the dark waves like a true mermaid. Wait, he tried to catch up with his fast companion. But he lost the impromptu competition entirely. How could he compete with the sea-born Undine? After a few minutes, Juan saw that the girl was turning back towards the shore and suddenly disappeared as if dissolved in the waves. Juan turned his head, trying to make out Galena in the moonlight, but she was nowhere to be seen. In complete despair, convinced that she got tangled in something and sank to the bottom, he shouted, "Gala! Galena! Where are you?" For several minutes, the only response was complete silence and the lazy rhythmic splashes of indifferent waves. He shouted again, with all his might, almost losing hope, "Gala!" and added in desperation, "My God, what is happening?" As suddenly as he heard, very close by, a silvery, cunning laugh. Undines must be laughing like that, luring naive men into their deadly traps, Juan thought, and cold shivers ran down his legs. The water now felt cold, and the whole endeavor seemed foolish and reckless. But then the laughter subsided, and he heard Galena's familiar and tender voice. "Swim over here, come on." From somewhere straight out of the rocks, as if in the moonlight, a long, graceful hand of Galena appeared and waved to him. "Here, this way." Swimming closer, Juan realized that Galena had simply swum into some crevice in the rocky shore. There was no land here anymore, and the waves crashed against the coastal cliffs, making noise and foaming. "Come here," she called him again and reached out her hand. He grabbed it and swam into the narrow crevice between the rocky walls, washed out by the sea. Galena led him along, and they cautiously made their way deeper into this fissure. Juan was afraid again, but he didn't show it. The girl confidently swam ahead, almost in complete darkness. He could barely make out her graceful head ahead and hear the splash of water. But then the stone walls began to widen, and light somehow increased. Suddenly, under his feet, he felt solid stones underwater and stood upright, catching his breath and looking around. "Where are we?" "This is my secret spot," Galena said proudly. "I found it when I was a child, and since then, I've never told anyone, not a single soul. Not even Grandpa," she added, feeling a little guilty. They went a little further, leaving the water behind, and the stones somehow turned warm and then were replaced by clean, coarse sand. The vaults of the underwater cave widened, and light from somewhere above penetrated this place. And in this light, Galena appeared to Juan like a real nymph, beautiful, ancient as the world, and eternally young, like the goddess of love herself, empyrean from the sea foam. Her hair cascaded down and covered her supple back like a shiny dark mantle. She smiled at him, revealing her small pearl-like teeth, and proudly gestured around. "Isn't it wonderful here?" "It's truly amazing," Juan agreed, admiring the hidden cave. "So, I'm the first mortal to be allowed into your magical chamber, myself?" He approached the girl closely, embraced her by her slender waist, pulled her closer to him, and found her moist, warm lips. "No, Juan," she whispered, "we shouldn't." But her body was already under his control. "Don't be afraid of me, my love, we'll be married soon anyway." And only the endlessly singing sea and the queenly moon, proudly watching from the sky, witnessed their tender love on that distant, warm May night. They returned to the extinguished campfire already in the morning. Everyone was still sleeping in the tents and having sweet dreams. The sea was also drowsy and completely calm, with a milky morning mist enveloping the distant horizon. "I need to go before Grandpa wakes up," Galena whispered softly and gently stroked her beloved on the cheek. "See you later, Juan." "I don't want to let you go," he hugged her tightly, stroking her damp loose hair. "My dear, my beloved. I'll come for you soon. When our tour is over, I'll come back to you, my girl. I'll take you to the capital. Here's the theater's office phone number." He took out a piece of paper with the scribbled number from his summer trousers pocket, just in case. "When we get married, they'll give us a separate room, maybe even an apartment. We'll live wonderfully together, you'll see. You'll join a theater school, and you'll have lots of fans. I'll surely be jealous of you." He glanced into her eyes with a light chuckle. "Are you crying?" "Why, my dear?" "I don't want you to leave," Galena said sorrowfully, choking back tears. "I have a bad feeling about this." "Nonsense," he comforted her with a kiss. "What nonsense are you talking about, my love? I'll definitely come back for you. Do you hear me?" "Yes," she nodded, and her hair fell heavily over her face. "Yes, goodbye, my love. Please come back soon, I beg you. We still have 2 months of touring. We'll be traveling around the regions almost the entire summer." Juan smiled faintly. "Then, back home, I'll have to take care of some things. They promised to give me leave in October, so I'll come back then." "Okay." She looked at him again, brushing her hair away from her eyes. "That's when I'll have my school vacation." "What school vacation?" He was surprised, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Regular autumn vacation," Galena replied, still not understanding. "I'm in my last year of school." Wait, Juan let her go and stepped back a bit. "You're still a schoolgirl? How old are you?" "I'll turn 17 next month," Galena answered softly. "Well, you're something." Juan raised his hands in surprise. "These things should be warned in advance, you know." He nervously rubbed his temples. "It's time for me to go." "Juan, what happened?" Galena asked tearfully, sensing a sudden change in him. "You know perfectly well what," he retorted sharply, but seeing her genuine desperation, he softened a bit. "Don't cry, kitten, everything's fine. Just don't tell anyone about our meeting, okay? Until we get married." "Okay," she looked at him trustingly. "Do you love me?" "Well, of course, I do." They exchanged a brief hug and a quick kiss on the forehead. "Well, go, baby girl, look, the sun is already rising." Oh, Galena suddenly realized. See you later, Juan, I'll be waiting for you very much. Until we meet again, my love, he turned around and started walking away. Until we meet again. He waved goodbye and quickly walked further and further away from her. Galena stood in the same spot where they parted, gazing after him in confusion. Something was not right, she could feel it. The mysterious magic of the past night was dripping away, disappearing into the cold sand, dissipating in the misty morning haze. Juan. She suddenly cried out in despair. Juan. It seemed to her that her heart was about to burst in her chest, and the rising sun would explode into billions of sparkling splashes and fall into the indifferent gray sea. He turned back, smiled at her lightly, just as he did on the stage the night before, waved his hand again, and blew her an air kiss. Galena sighed, lowered her head, and walked in the opposite direction. They never met again in their lives. Of course, at first, she hoped and waited, counting the days until their reunion. She waited patiently, not saying a word to anyone about what had happened that magical May night. She waited and hoped when she realized she was pregnant. She waited when the new school year began, and especially when the autumn vacation started. Her belly grew every day, and it became increasingly challenging to hide it. The child inside was already moving, and at times, such longing overwhelmed her that she wanted to leave everything behind and go far, far away into the sea, to dive into the depths, lie there on the waves, surrender to the elements, and think of nothing else. Let the sea carry her far away, where she would meet her beloved again. But she did nothing of the sort. She lived as usual. She went to classes, took care of household chores, sat with her books, and prepared for graduation exams. Of course, Juan never came. Galena fell into a melancholy despair. But there was nothing to do except tighten her scarf around her belly and rearrange her school dresses. The horrible truth came to light on the day she returned to school after the autumn vacation. During the penultimate lesson, she suddenly felt so sick that she could barely understand where she was. Fragments of words reached her confused mind with difficulty, and she felt terribly dizzy. She had no strength to endure. "Can I leave?" she asked the teacher with a stumbling tongue, and after receiving permission, she tried to get up from the desk and leave the classroom. But as she reached the door, the walls seemed to sway, and the ceiling came crashing down on her. Without even having time to be frightened properly, she fell to the side and went silent. "Gala, what's wrong with you?" The teacher panicked and, rushing to her, patted her cheeks. wake up, Gala. Someone quickly go get the medical assistant," he shouted to the hushed class. The teacher himself picked up his student's heavy body and carried her gently to the teacher's office and laid her on the couch. Teachers ran around, bringing smelling salts. With great effort, Galena opened her eyes and let out a heavy sigh. Water, and then she vomited right on the floor next to the couch. "You, girl, seem to be pregnant," the cleaning lady Aunt Anna glanced at her, coming over with a bucket and a cloth. Galena looked away and didn't reply, pretending not to hear. After about 20 minutes, the local paramedic, a middle-aged woman with red hands and a piercing gaze, arrived. She chased everyone out of the office and thoroughly examined Galena without saying a word. "You'll ruin both yourself and the child, dear," she said sternly, and Galena immediately burst into tears. Well, no need to wail like that. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Stop crying, you should have thought about it earlier." "So, when did it happen?" After hearing the approximate date and whispering something to herself, the paramedic deduced. "Your term is at the end of February, my dear. Until then, we'll switch you to homeschooling. No need to show off your belly at school. I suppose your grandpa doesn't know anything, right?" Galena looked down, feeling ashamed. The woman rolled her eyes, sighed, and shook her head. What are these girls thinking about? It's simply astounding every time. Upon learning the news, her grandpa didn't say a word. He went to his room and locked the door, not coming out until late evening. Eventually, Galena, tormented by waiting, approached the door and timidly scratched. "Grandpa." No response. She knocked again, louder this time, then again and again, until finally she gathered the courage to push the door lightly. It opened right away. It turned out it wasn't locked. Galena cautiously entered the room. "Grandpa." Still, he didn't respond or indicate that he heard her. From the entrance, she could only see his feet in warm home socks. The bed was positioned with the headboard to the window, so she couldn't see her grandpa's face. "Please don't be angry, Grandpa, I couldn't tell you earlier. I promised Juan I wouldn't tell anyone, and he promised to come and take me to Capitol. We'll definitely get married, do you hear?" Galena was speaking louder now and almost turning to shouting. "I even have a phone, the theater's phone, where he works. He's probably just delayed, maybe they rescheduled the vacation, some tours or something. It happens, right? It happens, Grandpa." Galena burst into tears and slumped onto a chair next to the bed. Her grandpa still didn't move. He remained lying in the same position, stretched out straight. "Why are you silent? Don't you want to talk to me anymore?" Galena asked bitterly and touched her grandpa's hand. Immediately, she recoiled as if she had touched a hot iron. The hand was cold as ice. "Grandpa," Galena said plaintively, already understanding everything but still not believing. "Grandpa!" she yelled, raising her voice again, shaking the lying figure and peering into the calm, almost sleeping face. "Grandfather! My dear Grandpa, why are you leaving me? Please, my dear, wake up." And, startled, she ran out of the room. She rushed through the yard like an arrow, nearly breaking the gate, screaming as she ran onto the street. "Help!" The funeral and memorial services passed alongside Galena's consciousness. Her body was present at all the ceremonies, sitting by the coffin, looking with tear-filled eyes at the figure lying with hands crossed over the chest. The waxen features of the face barely resembled her former lively grandpa, Arnaud. And her soul. Galena's soul seemed to float far away from here. She mechanically answered questions, prepared and distributed dishes, washed dishes, and then scrubbed the floor clean. But only when it was all over, and the suffocating smell of incense in the small church on the hill, which made her feel sick again, and the endless gloomy cemetery with tombstones sticking out here and there, and the freshly dug clay pit into which her dear grandpa was lowered for some reason, closed with black cemetery earth and crowned with a simple wooden cross, temporary, without even a photograph. Only then, when she returned home, did Galena finally realize that it was all real. Her grandpa was gone, he died, and he would never come back to her, never ever enter the house, smile with his gray mustache, ask how she's doing, hug her with his big hands, or pat her head with a warm palm. There was no one else in this world for her. She was left all alone, completely alone, and now no one would love her as her grandpa did, and no one would help her. Galena helplessly collapsed on her bed, buried her face in the pillow, and cried until the last tears ran dry. After the death of Grandpa Arnaud, the villagers split into two camps. Some blamed Galena for everything, accusing her of immorality, saying that she herself drove her grandpa to the grave with her disgraceful behavior. They sighed mockingly when talking among themselves. Well, what did you expect? Like mother, like daughter, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I wonder who she seduced. Probably from Renato, I bet. Or maybe one of her classmates. Who knows? She's tight-lipped like she's got a secret to guard. Probably ashamed now, I'm sure. Not only did she bring shame, but she also killed her own grandpa. Others pitied the unfortunate, deceived orphan, helping with the funeral and memorial services. The world was not without kind people after all. The elderly music teacher, Senora Alvarez, came and brought 3 wrinkled 50-ruble notes. Take it, Galena, you're going through such a difficult time now, my poor dear, and she hugged her trembling, red-eyed beloved student. It's all right, everything will work out. Hold on, you need to think about the baby first, do you hear? Gala nodded and gratefully looked at Senora Alvarez. Thank you, I'll give back everything I can. Come Juan, the teacher replied softly. I can't take anything with me to the grave either. I've been alone for a long time, no husband, no family. Let me know if you need anything. All right? All right, Gala escorted her to the gate and was alone again. A few days later, the neighbor Ursula came, whom Grandpa strongly disliked during his lifetime. Gala knew this well and met her cautiously. Hello. What do you want? But Ursula, as if not noticing Gala's dry and reserved tone, suddenly burst into tears and rushed to embrace her, sobbing. My dear, my poor orphan, forgive me, sinful me, forgive me. It's me, I'm the one to blame for everything. What are you talking about, Aunt Ursula? Gala was surprised, thinking that the neighbor might not be in her right mind. At the funeral, she didn't seem so distraught, but now she seemed either drunk or mentally disturbed, even though Gala couldn't smell any alcohol on her. Let's go inside. Away from prying eyes, Ursula suddenly regained her composure and practically ran through the garden, pulling Gala along. Entering the house, she sat down at the table in the kitchen and sighed. I should have confessed everything to you a long time ago, and God knows, I tried so many times. I came to tell you everything, to protect you from trouble, but your grandpa wouldn't allow it, may he rest in peace. The uninvited guest crossed herself, took a simple cross on a cord from under her blouse, and fervently kissed it. Cross my heart, dear. I will tell you the whole truth, as it is. It was a long time ago. Neither you nor your late mother, may she rest in peace, she crossed herself again, were even born. Your grandpa and I were as young as you are now. The neighbor squinted and looked into the distance, as if she saw the long-gone years and events there. Yes, young and passionate, she smiled slightly at her memories. Your grandpa was the most outstanding guy in the village back then, really, you can ask anyone. All the girls were crazy about him and ran after him like crazy puppies, but he only had eyes for one girl, your Grandma Maria, may she rest in peace. Ursula paid tribute to another deceased, eternal memory, eternal rest. You look just like her, my dear, like two peas in a pod. As for your mother, she took after her father more, but you inherited all the looks of your grandma. His parents even sent matchmakers to their yard and arranged everything as it should be, but I couldn't figure out what my beloved Arnaud would soon become a married man. Yes, my dear, I was deeply in love with him, she confessed to the astonished Gala. I lost my head and all sense of shame, the guest blushed slightly. One night at a celebration, when we were all having fun throughout the night, the guys were flirting with the girls, dancing in circles, and jumping over the bonfire. I deliberately got your grandpa drunk with strong, twice fermented wine. Oh, how foolish I was then. Maria's parents kept her under strict control, and she went home very early, as soon as the evening dances ended. And I took advantage of Arnaud's drunken stupor and dragged him to the hayloft. Despite her embarrassment, Ursula smiled dreamily as she spoke about it, and her face smoothed out and lit up with quiet joy. How happy I was that night. Those who have never loved will never understand the happiness of the lovers. And not for a single moment afterwards did I regret anything, she added with defiance. That's why I won't judge you for anything, my dear, she affectionately touched Gala's cold hand. And don't punish yourself in vain, don't listen to wicked idle gossip. But he never married you, Gala looked at Ursula with regret. She felt sorry for this elderly, dried-up woman whom the whole village considered a wicked and scandalous person. No, of course not, Ursula sadly smiled. When he sobered up, he was terribly angry with me, left early in the morning, and didn't even say goodbye, not a single kind word. I'm sorry, Gala said, please don't be angry with him. No, my dear, Ursula replied with regret and bitterness, it's not me who should be angry. You still don't know anything. Listen to what I did afterward, that's the main thing I want to tell you. She paused for a moment, then decisively raised her head and looked Gala straight in the eyes. I was so insanely jealous of your grandpa that I considered getting rid of his fiancée. Gala frowned. How would you do that? In those years, there lived a woman on the other side of the bay, the neighbor said. She lived alone in seclusion in her village, and nobody from the locals knew who she was, where she came from, or how old she was. They said that she hadn't changed since the times of our great-grandfathers and still wandered across the steppe, just like before, collecting various herbs and maybe something else, who knows what. With a large basket on her shoulders, she wandered far and wide across all the local lands, the boundless steppe, the seashore, and they even say she ventured into the distant forest. Sometimes she was not seen for a long time, and then she would return again. So, I went to that woman, consumed by jealousy and dark envy. I swore to keep silent, not to tell a living soul what I learned from her. That's why I can't tell you exactly what she did and how I will have to pay for my grave sins sooner or later. Ursula sighed, infinitely tired and doomed. But I still want to save at least you if I couldn't save your grandma and mother. She exclaimed passionately. Oh, how many times I punished myself and wanted to make things right, but it was too late. You can't undo such sorcery, the storyteller slumped sadly. While Maria was alive, your grandpa didn't allow me anywhere near your home. She shook her head mournfully and strictly forbade me to even talk to her. He threatened to kill me with his own hands if I came closer to his young wife than the distance of my own shadow. But I didn't need to get closer. The terrible black magic did it all for me. It didn't happen right away, and I had hoped that everything was fine, and that woman simply fooled me, but when after the otherwise healthy Maria fell seriously ill after childbirth, I finally saw the truth. She became crippled, and your grandpa carried her in his arms. Then he made a special wheelchair for her, and she lived in that wheelchair. And their little girl, your own mother, was born so adorable, the whole village admired her. They named her beautifully as Melania. So this Melania, your own mother, grew up and reached the age of 16. And I was anxiously waiting for her to turn 17 because, by my idiotic request, the witch had appointed severe troubles for all the women in Arnaud's family at that very age. One has already come true. Maria became disabled, and, according to rumors, there could be no more relations between her and your grandpa. He didn't touch her until her death. And then, after several months, it turned out that Melania was pregnant by someone, and she was about to give birth. Oh, what she had to go through, poor thing. And Arnaud and Maria, and their whole family, Maria's parents, were still alive back then. A few months later, Melania died in childbirth, and shortly after her, Maria passed away. Rest in peace, eternal memory, Ursula muttered routinely, crossing herself. And your grandpa stopped interacting with people. At all, only when necessary. He lived the rest of his life as a recluse. Well, you should know this, my dear, Ursula smiled sadly. He longed for his wife and daughter immensely. But he still stayed in this world for you. Everyone was surprised how much you resembled your grandma, as if someone had painted a portrait of her while she was alive. Oh, how I wanted to warn you, to tell you everything, but he never allowed me, and he still threatened to harm me if I approached you to talk. And now, Ursula sobbed, dropped her head on the table, and started crying again. Gala, her heart filled with a mix of pity and contempt for human superstitions, approached the neighbor and gently patted her shoulders. Well, enough, Aunt Ursula. I personally don't believe in any curses. Stop tormenting yourself unnecessarily. I am the only one to blame for what happened, and no one else in the whole world. I have to face the consequences now, the girl sighed. You're a kind soul, Gala. Ursula noisily blew her nose into a crumpled handkerchief. A kind soul, just like your grandma was. She never complained to anyone and helped everyone as much as she could. But, my dear, I haven't told you everything yet. Gala remained silent, unsure of what other tale she would have to listen to now. That sorceress didn't just grant my request for nothing, Ursula said, smirking. She received something in return. What was it? Gala barely managed to utter the words. Her mouth suddenly became dry, and her tongue heavy and unwieldy. My unborn child, Ursula breathed out and covered her face with her hands. Gala was truly terrified now. Until this moment, she had regarded the woman's revelation as the delusions of a tormented conscience. But now, it felt as if the cold breath of death itself had suddenly descended upon her. She had never experienced such horror, not even at her grandfather's grave. She said, Ursula continued with a steady, colorless voice, that the curse would be in effect until an heir of male gender is born in Arnaud and Maria's family, just like my innocent son was deprived of life. How could you? Gala stared at Ursula with eyes widened in horror, unable to utter another word. Now you know everything, Ursula announced without answering the question and, stumbling like a drunk, she left the house. 2 days later, her body was found washed up on the shore far from her native village, almost near the city. Distant relatives arrived to identify her, and soon another fresh grave appeared in the local cemetery. Gala moved in with Sonora Alvarez. Both needed support, both were lonely, and now they lived together in Arnaud's grandfather's house, as close and dear people to each other. More than 20 years had passed over the indifferent sea since then, and much had changed in the world. Gala gave birth to a healthy and robust baby girl on time and named her Melania, in honor of her mother. They lived with Sonora Alvarez with difficulty, but not poorly. The old woman had her pension, and Gala received single mother benefits. The small household and garden didn't let them starve. Although the young mother had to toil every day to the point of exhaustion, everything they needed was their own: milk, eggs, chicken meat, and they slaughtered a pig in the autumn, had potatoes, and various homemade preserves. Gala graduated from school later than her classmates. Already the next year, she passed all the final exams and received her diploma. The little girl was taken care of by her named grandmother while Gala worked around the house. And a year later, an unexpected suitor appeared, a not yet old widower from the neighboring village. He even agreed to Gala's condition of moving to her house. 32-year-old Hugo had a 5-year-old son from his deceased wife, and a few years later, the couple had 2 more children of their own. Thus, a large and harmonious family was formed to parents, for children, and the elderly grandmother who cherished them all to her immense joy. There were no misfortunes with Gala and her children, thank God. Apparently, Ursula took her curse with her to the other world. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, in the distant capital far from the southern sea, the famous and now universally beloved actor Senor Parras celebrated his 50th birthday in a grand manner. The theater where he served staged a cheerful performance, a cabbage show, and it was later shown on television so that provincial viewers who couldn't come to the capital personally could watch and enjoy. The country was going through challenging times. It was the year 93, and another crisis was approaching. For ordinary people, especially those who had lived their lives in entirely different conditions, it was simply unclear where everything was heading and what to do about it. In the village where Gala still lived with her family, they weathered the difficult times more simply. Their small farm continued to provide for everyone, and they were not chasing after trendy things. The eldest daughter Melania had been studying at the economics faculty in the city for 3 years, and her mother's heart was at ease. The girl had grown up to be serious, responsible, and independently enrolled in the institute, causing no problems for her parents. She had a good head on her shoulders, and a charming one at that. She looked nothing like her mother. With her blondish red hair and hazel eyes, she was a striking contrast to Gala. Determined, quick, with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, she quickly got along with people, could find an approach to anyone, and always achieved her goals, no matter what she set out to do. People were drawn to her, sensing her firm and whole nature. In school, Melania was the most popular girl, always surrounded by a crowd of friends and enthusiastic admirers. However, she did not show any special preference for anyone, remained independent, knew her worth, and did not follow in her mother's footsteps. To anyone who offered her any form of relationship, she would respond with a teasing tone. "Oh, that is very flattering, but what can you offer me, sir, besides your immense love?" Suitors would immediately retreat and disappear, and she would just shrug and continue studying her textbooks and reading books for hours on end. Moving away from her family to the city did not change her, and she still did not acquire a boyfriend. When asked by her relatives, she would just laugh. Well, why rush? Now was not the time to be afraid of the status of an old maid. The mother sighed upon hearing such words from her eldest daughter. The father, on the contrary, responded approvingly. Well done, Melania. In this life, you should rely only on yourself and not compromise. When the time comes, you will surely feel who destiny has in store for you. The headstrong girl always found something to argue about. And what if destiny has no one in store for me? Many people live perfectly fine lives alone, regardless of their gender. What about love? Her mother gently asked. Love doesn't come to everyone, Mom. The girl hugged her mother and affectionately rubbed her cheek against hers, like a big cat. You and Dad were lucky, and I am very happy for you. But I have my own destiny. I would like to know what it has in store for you, Galena said softly. A person is the master of their own destiny, her daughter replied with a laugh. And that's exactly how she acted everywhere. She pursued what she wanted, not waiting for life to gift her anything. Still, her parents were shocked when one beautiful day their eldest daughter appeared at the doorstep of their home and announced with great satisfaction, Mom, Dad, I'm giving up economics and going to apply to the theater school in the capital. What? Galena was astonished. But what about your 3.5 years of studies? Oh, who cares? Melania shrugged in her characteristic manner. I realized it's not for me. Why waste another 1.5 years sitting around and taking someone else's place? At least get your diploma, her father intervened. You're so close, and having a profession is valuable. What's the point of having that profession if I have no intention of working as an economist even for a single day? The girl reasonably retorted. Well, just in case, the mother spoke hesitantly. It's better to have some bread and butter. Ah, you mean that if I don't get into the acting faculty, then I can at least slog somewhere as an accountant? Melania laughed. No thanks. Late in the evening, Galena couldn't sleep for a long time. She simply couldn't find peace of mind, contemplating why her always prudent and calm daughter had this sudden aspiration. Could it be an inherited trait showing itself? What should she do now? What if the girl actually gets admitted? She's so stubborn. She might meet her real father or, God forbid, some relatives. Various assumptions made Galena's hair stand on end, thinking about how her daughter could suffer not knowing anything about her origin, and how those who might discover something could take advantage of her. But who and what could really know, if she thought rationally? It was all so long ago that no one would even remember. Besides, Juan himself knows nothing about the existence of an illegitimate daughter somewhere. Perhaps he sang serenades of mad love and called many women nymphs and sylphs. These famous artists probably have numerous illegitimate children, no doubt. On every tour, they must have taken advantage of the opportunity and seduced another trusting victim. But still, I must tell her everything, Galena decided, accustomed to doing the right thing. Given how her life is unfolding, she has the right to know her real father. With this resolution, she finally calmed down and fell asleep. Melania, my dear, she said to her daughter after breakfast, I need to talk to you seriously. What's up, Mom? Are you going to talk me out of going to theater school? Give it up, you'll just waste your time, the girl laughed. No, it's not about that at all, Galena hurried to assure her. Let's go, let's take a walk to the bay. Are you okay? Melania, in turn, became worried. Are you going to tell me something terrible? Oh no, calm down, let's go. They settled side by side on a huge stone warmed by the hot sun, lying there since time immemorial. Galena gathered her courage and told her everything, fearing accusations in return. But Melania remained silent, thoughtful, and somewhat incredulous for a while, then looked at her mother with admiration. Well, Mom, you're something. So, my real father is Juan Para? Yes, Galena sadly confirmed. Interesting, the girl pondered again. Are there any proofs? What proofs? The woman was quite flustered. I don't know, you know better. Letters, photographs, something like that. I don't even remember, Galena shrugged, although. Now she thought, frowning, and after a while said, I'll check the old boxes in the attic, maybe I'll find something. But, Melania. What, Mom? Will you start despising me now? Galena asked, tears in her eyes. Are you crazy? The daughter was amazed. Why on earth would I despise you? I'm proud of you. I've always been proud, and now even more so. Not every mother would find the courage to confess such a delicate matter to her child. And Melania burst into laughter involuntarily, quickly glancing at Galena. Galena couldn't hold back either and nervously laughed along with her daughter. Now they were both laughing heartily together, filled with joy, the mother from relief, and the daughter from her inherent ability to find something comical in any situation. Melania arrived in the capital city just the day before the entrance exams. She didn't have anywhere special to stay, so she wisely decided that the less she spent on a hotel, the better. Her parents did provide her with some money, of course, but she didn't intend to waste it. Right after getting off the train, she went to submit her documents to the admissions office. Spending the night in some cheap second-rate hotel didn't really matter. In any case, where she laid her head didn't make much difference. She began tidying herself up early in the morning. It's not that she considered the striking appearance crucial for an artist, but neglecting her natural looks was also unnecessary. With her head held high, she entered the room where the capable commission considered the candidates and nodded almost regally. Good day. Hello, they politely nodded in response. What have you prepared for us? Melania? One of the professors read from the exam lists and couldn't hide his surprise. What a wonderful name you have. To each their own, the girl shrugged. I've personally been used to it for a long time. The others smiled approvingly at her joke, noted something in their papers, and said she could begin. Melania chose a rather eccentric excerpt, the scandalous scene from Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales for her reading, for which he was once threatened with excommunication from the church. She narrated it passionately, changing her voice for each character, and during her performance, muffled laughter and whispering could be heard among the examiners. Well, finally, said the same artist who was amazed by her name, you have impressed us very much. Unfortunately, our chairman is currently absent for very respectable reasons. I understand that my request is unusual, but could you come again the day after tomorrow, so he can personally hear you? Sure thing, the girl agreed as if talking to a longtime friend. And who is our chairman? Juan Parra, of course, the professor grinned. Melania smiled with her most charming smile. I'll definitely come. The next 2 days, she spent radically changing her appearance. She dyed her hair a shocking red-orange color, almost emptied her pockets to buy expensive contact lenses that changed the color of her eyes, and dressed in some ridiculous jumpsuit she found at a flea market. At the appointed time, she confidently appeared at the door of the auditorium, causing a stir among the professors and genuine laughter. However, not a single muscle twitched on her face. She remained composed, like Athena herself. Well, let's listen and see if you're as good as my colleagues speak of you, said Parra, adjusting his luxurious horn-rimmed glasses. It seems you read Chaucer quite successfully the day before yesterday. Yes, Melania agreed, but today I won't read him. For you personally, she emphasized the word, I prepared something else. Quite an original girl, the professors whispered among themselves, undeniably comedic talent. I decided to read some good old classic literature for you today, the girl continued without a hint of embarrassment. Approaching the very table where the accomplished artist sat, she placed a book before Juan Parra, as if accidentally opening it to the second page, where an old, worn-out sheet of paper lay with a scribbled phone number and a dedication, to my beloved Sylph Gala from her faithful friend Juan Parra. May 27, 1977 inch, and quickly stepped back, attentively observing the artist's reaction. Seeing the dedication, he frowned slightly and promptly closed the book, as if eager to examine the cover as soon as possible. Well, not a bad choice. Shakespeare, as they say, is Shakespeare, even in Africa, Parra responded. I agree, Melania nodded. I'll tell you more. Shakespeare is the same immortal classic, the poet of love, even in the provinces. Do you agree? In the provinces? Senor Parra was surprised and burst into laughter. Very witty. Nothing witty about it, Melania shrugged. I come from a small village in a distant region myself. You know how beautiful it is there? A small sea bay, sandy shores, secluded coves. Tourists love it there. Have you ever been there? I've been to various cities, Juan abruptly cut her off in a metallic tone, long before you were even born, my dear. I believe you willingly, the girl nodded, and her eyes danced playfully like lively, mischievous imps. And now I'll read you some Shakespeare, the famous balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet. And she read. Oh, how she read! The admissions committee, who could not contain their laughter the day before while listening to Chaucer from this peculiar girl, now listened solemnly to her convincing rendition, and some even had their eyes glistening with tears. Juan, on the other hand, sat with a stone-cold expression, and towards the end, interrupting the young talent mid-sentence, he said sharply, "That's enough." The girl immediately stopped, but she didn't look upset or embarrassed like many other candidates would have in such a situation. Instead, she gazed challengingly into the face of her main examiner. "Did you not like it?" she asked calmly. "My dear, you have absolutely no acting talent," Para said with irritation. "As you wish, Senor Para," she shrugged indifferently, took her book, and left the auditorium, gently closing the door behind her. But Juan, someone from the commission, started, surprised by the turn of events. "We don't need students with such excessive self-confidence," Juan replied. He nervously got up from his seat, took a cigarette from his jacket pocket, walked to the window, and lit it. Soon, they delivered a telegram to Melania's parents' rural home with the following content: "Passed the first round. Send some more money, large expenses for costumes, will repay everything after the first performance. Love, Melanie." Melanie, that's what she calls herself now, her mother smiled that day. She spent quite a lot on just one telegram, her father disapproved. She could have written much shorter. She wanted to share her joy, her mother said affectionately. "Don't grumble, Hugo." Melania didn't waste any time. She deliberately acted the way she did with Para, well aware of the possible consequences. Now she was preparing for the second act of her own tragicomedy. To do that, she took the following actions. While passing by the institute, she found out where Para lived. When she got there, she read the nameplates on the doors, noting the surnames next to each apartment number. She carefully studied them, made some notes for herself, and then went to a domestic help agency. "I want to work as a nanny in a big, nice family," she declared to the administrator. Looking at the modestly dressed girl with short dark hair and a simple provincial face, the woman asked about her qualifications. "I grew up in a big family myself," she smiled with an open, disarming smile. "I have 2 younger siblings, a brother, and a little sister. I practically raised them, didn't sleep many nights. And I also did the housekeeping, worked in the garden. It's tough being the oldest daughter in a stepfather's house." The girl sighed heavily and looked away, her eyes filling with bitter tears. "Oh, you poor thing," the administrator sympathized. "All right, we'll find something for you. Here are a few suitable vacancies." Half an hour later, the poor thing was merrily strolling around the upscale neighborhood to the specified address. Over the next few weeks, she diligently worked as a model nanny for 2 chubby little twins in a respectable, well-off family. And finally, one ordinary and unremarkable sunny morning in the apartment of the famous actor Juan Para, the phone rang persistently. Who could it be at this hour? His wife, who was also a popular singer, exclaimed in annoyance. "Darling, who did you tell Suarez to let in for a morning audience?" Her fiancé mumbled something incoherent and turned to the other side. "Get up immediately, go, open it," his wife was indignant. "I can't possibly show up in front of your friends like this. Come on, you probably made plans with Alex to go fishing again and forgot." Hello, he didn't even have time to open the door when some unfamiliar girl, pushing a wide double stroller with chubby twins in front of her, rudely barged into the hallway. "How did you get in here?" Juan protested, blinking his sleepy eyes. "The usual way, on my feet," the audacious girl declared, looking around in admiration at the surroundings. What a lovely furniture set. It must be Karelian birch. And what do we have here? She partially opened the door to the bathroom. Wow, you can fit a whole swimming pool in here. How dare you? Juan finally woke up and got truly angry. Who are you and how did you get in here, huh? He exclaimed. I figured it out, of course. It's been a long time since we've had anyone like you here, and for some reason, he looked in the large mirror, adjusting the few hairs that covered his balding head. But you're wasting your time, darling. I definitely cannot be the father of your charming kids, Juan laughed nervously. To our knowledge, I've been hopelessly infertile for a long time, and that's confirmed by medical documents. Do you hear me? The girl, impudently chewing gum, didn't say a word but burst into laughter and blew a huge bubble, completely unfazed by the famous actor. One of the twins started to whimper, and she immediately picked him up, consoling him loudly. Oh, my darling, my poor little thing, my precious little orphan. This is outrageous. Juan raised his hands to the ceiling with a completely theatrical gesture. Can you please tell me what you want? Oh no, never mind, I already know what. And you won't get it here, do you hear me? Unfortunate blackmailer. Amidst the noise, Juan's wife emerged from the bedroom with a hairnet on her head and the remains of a nourishing mask on her face. What's going on here, for heaven's sake, Juan? Who is this cheeky girl? Another one admirer of yours? Irene, calm down, please, my love, Juan looked worriedly at his wife. It's some kind of monstrous misunderstanding. You know perfectly well that I can't have any children. But you can certainly have grandchildren, the stranger suddenly said in a completely different tone, spitting out the gum neatly and looking straight into the actor's eyes. Daddy. What? Juan was stunned and, stepping back, bumped into a chair, which toppled over with a loud crash. What did you say? He repeated in a softer voice, examining the girl from head to toe. Don't recognize me? She said mockingly. Of course, we've only met once. Not enough for a caring daddy, don't you think? Juan, what's going on here? His wife finally broke in, firm and loud, enunciating every word as she moved towards the commotion. I don't know, he said wearily, picked up the fallen chair, and sat heavily on it, holding his chest with one hand. Oh, this won't do, Melania suddenly said anxiously. She placed the baby back in the stroller and approached Juan. Don't you dare die right now, Dad. Don't even say it's a heart attack. He's just suffering from a common hangover, his wife smirked. He's as healthy as a bull. But what about you two? Where did you come from? What audacity to barge into someone's apartment and claim you're his daughter? What evidence do you have? He saw the evidence, not long ago. Melania nodded towards Juan as if he were an inanimate object. Plenty of evidence. And he got scared. Right, Dad? Juan remained silent, feeling anxious and cautious as he scrutinized the uninvited guest. And since he already knows everything, I'll tell you this story briefly, the girl continued, addressing Juan's wife again. Don't worry, it won't take much time. So, in a small seaside village, there lived a simple but very beautiful girl named Gala. She was actually a sylph, but she didn't know anything about it until a traveling artist from the capital explained it to her. A young artist, Melania specified, crossing her arms over her chest. He took advantage of the young girl's beauty and innocence, and then he left and went back to his distant capital. That's the whole story, as old as time and just as eternal. I don't know what happened to that artist later or how he suddenly lost the ability to have children, as he claims now. Melania turned to Juan and shrugged. Frankly, I'm not interested in that at all. But I do know what happened next with Gala, I know it very well. She waited and waited for her beloved, as he promised to come back for her and take her away. He promised to marry her and live happily ever after, as it usually happens in fairy tales. But life is hardly like a fairy tale, Melania sighed dramatically. 9 months after meeting the capital artist, Gala gave birth to a daughter and named her Melania, in honor of her deceased mother who died after giving a birth. I understand, it's all too complex for you, with so many new characters all at once. Just let me mention one more, Gala's old grandpa, who couldn't imagine that his granddaughter would suddenly discover she's a sylph. And when he finally learned about it, he suffered a heart attack and passed away, dear old Arnaud. Melania sadly lowered her head. Not too many years passed, and Gala's daughter grew up and, at a beautiful moment, realized she was born to be an actress. Yes, that happens. People live their lives without knowing who they truly are. And then, bam, it hits them like a bolt of lightning. Holy Father, and I, it turns out, am just that. And so it goes. Melania surveyed her small audience with a triumphant gaze. Everyone remained silent, involuntarily gripped by a sense of empathy, as it often happens with spectators witnessing a performance by a truly talented artist. Even the twins quieted down in their stroller. So, Dad, the girl turned to Juan, you've already had a chance to appreciate my acting talent, and apparently, you understood what back during the audition. Now you can also assess the addition to your family. These are your grandchildren, poor orphans, please love and cherish them. I leave them in your care, and I myself intend to apply to a different educational institution since my biological father turned me away. What? Juan's wife exclaimed in indignation. Juan himself spoke quietly. I thought you were a blackmailer, somehow found out about that old affair. Your mother was underage at the time, and I learned about it too late, got scared, panicked, and decided it was best never to go back there. Why didn't she tell me about the child, that I apparently have a daughter? Because she had pride and self-respect, Melania sharply retorted. Because she had to carry the burden of the house, the household, and a small child on her own. Thankfully, a good man came along after some time who loved her and accepted a stranger's baby in his arms. He's my real father, and you are nothing. With these angry words, Melania turned around, took the stroller, and began to leave the apartment. Bravo! Bravissimo! Suddenly, an approving hoarse voice sounded nearby. Only then did everyone present realize that the door had been left unlocked and even partially open, and standing right next to it was an elderly, silver-haired woman in an elegant dress adorned with rings and an intricate hairstyle, who had been calmly listening to everything happening in Para's apartment. Senora Nieto, aren't you ashamed? Juan's wife exclaimed, approaching the door. Eavesdropping on other people's conversations. Well, not entirely other people's, the elderly lady responded nonchalantly, flicking ashes from a long, elegant cigarette. After all, this young lady came here precisely for me. How for you? Juan's wife was astonished. Very simple, the old woman smiled. Our Suarez called me about 3/4 of an hour ago and said that a certain young lady wishes to offer her services as my housekeeper. I've been searching for a decent servant for 3 months now since parting ways with my Rechka, she sighed, and I just can't find anyone I like. These insufferable agencies keep sending brainless girls my way, she complained to her interlocutor. But how did he let her in with the children? Juan, who had approached them, was amazed. Was she trying to get hired as a housekeeper or a nanny? I told him that I'm finishing my job as a nanny this week, and I have nowhere to take these little rascals, Melania explained straightforwardly, that's all. Come along, dear, the old woman clutched the girl's hand. Help me, like this. It seems to me that I've lost my housekeeper again, but I've discovered an uncut diamond for our theater, a true talent. Forget about your useless dad, he won't do anything for you anyway. Wait. Juan shouted. Where are you going? I don't understand. So, they are not my grandchildren? No, Dad, Melania turned around and sarcastically replied to him, I learned from that old story and avoided repeating my mom's mistakes. You can continue living your life calmly. I don't need anything from you, really. I just wanted to see what kind of person you are. And she entered the elevator, accompanied by the incredibly content Senora Nieto, pushing the stroller with the unfamiliar twins in front of her. Now tell me quickly, my dear, how did you manage all this so skillfully? The impatient Senora Nieto asked Melania. In the past, she was a brilliant actress, a prima of the capital's theaters, and now a faded rose, still enjoying undeniable authority in her circles and occasionally playing roles of charismatic old ladies. Well, it's not that difficult, really, the girl shrugged, watching the twins doze off peacefully on the small couch. I found out where he works, where he lives, and intentionally placed a volume of Shakespeare on his exam, the one he left for my mother with his affectionate inscription. And convincing your Swiss guard was the easiest part, she grinned playfully. Where are you going, young lady? She said, perfectly imitating old Suarez's speech and mannerisms. I said to him, I was sent by an agency to the 13th, to Senora Nieto. He told me to be on my best behavior because she's already fired either the 8th or the 9th housekeeper in the past 3 weeks. She's furious. Senora Nieto burst out laughing. Excellent, dear, you will go far, mark my words. And I'll definitely help you with that. You know what, right now, we'll have coffee, and I'll make sure there's cherry liqueur. Then I'll call the director of the theater school and ask him to accept you into the course. The admissions are already closed, but he'll make an exception for me. And they won't regret it. She winked at her young guest and led her to the kitchen dining room, where the once magnificent decor now looked worn out and showed clear signs of the long absence of proper cleaning. The cherry liqueur turned out to be incredibly delicious, and Senora Nieto knew how to brew coffee as well, so the guest appreciated both the beverages and the gingerbread cookies. My dear, the theatrical diva gestured dramatically, not only I know, the whole capital is aware of it. It's a rather ugly story, and it happened a long time ago. Let me tell you how it went. You see, when he married for the second time, he married the daughter of a very high-ranking official, and Angelina glanced up at the ceiling, implying the father of the bride's extremely prestigious position. Everyone attended her wedding, absolutely everyone, my dear, actors, theater folks, and all sorts of important people. It was a splendid wedding, absolutely magnificent. The girl's father really outdid himself. But after some time, not that long, actually, the new young wife gave birth to a completely black baby. Yes, dear, absolutely black. And so adorable. Senora Nieto chuckled cheerfully. Oh, what a magnificent scandal followed. It was worthy of a theatrical production, I assure you. You see, the supposed father accused his beloved, and she, not being a fool, said they needed to check who his own mommy had slept with. Can you imagine? She suggested that sometimes genetics can go sideways through generations. Well, and Para, to clear the honor of his family in every sense, went and did various tests. And that's when they discovered, you won't believe it, my dear, they found out that he was infertile a long time ago. But how is that possible? Melania said thoughtfully. I believe my mother, you know. Oh, my dear, of course, your mother speaks the absolute truth, Senora Nieto rushed to reassure her. Just look at you, and you'll see that you are his daughter. You resemble him as only a daughter can resemble her father. I'm amazed that they didn't notice it right away at the university admission. Well, I dyed my hair in a monstrous color and wore colored contact lenses, Melania calmly informed her, eliciting another burst of laughter from the elderly prima donna. Darling, you've absolutely killed me, she continued laughing and laughing until she finally started coughing. After taking a sip of water, she resumed her story. So, where did we leave off? The thing is, Parr paid for his extremely promiscuous lifestyle by catching a nasty venereal disease from some sylph-like creature. And some of these diseases are so insidious, my dear, that they quietly reside in their victims' bodies without showing any signs for many years. But the consequences of such a symbiosis can be extremely dire, indeed. And that's precisely what happened to your father, my dear. In his youth, he could have fathered a child with anyone, anywhere, but as the years went by, he lost that ability. Just like that. He went through a long and painful divorce with his second wife, all because of her father's position. And with his third and the fourth official wife, he spent many years trying to conceive an heir until he finally accepted his diagnosis. Some time ago, we had caravans of his admirers here, and each one claimed to have his child or even twins, just like you did today. Angelina chuckled again. But gradually, that list dwindled and disappeared. That's why he and Irene were so surprised to see you in their hallway. Well, enough talk for today. Leave me your phone number and come back, say, the day after tomorrow. We'll go to the theater school together. And now, I should rest. All the best, my dear. Melania warmly said her goodbyes to her hospitable hostess, took the twins, and left on her own. As for Juan, exhausted, irritated, and thrown off balance by everything that had happened, he argued fiercely with his wife, then decided to leave the city and head to the dacha to lick his emotional wounds, fish, and relax with friends, whom he promptly invited to join him. For some time, it helped. But more and more often, he found himself mentally returning to that day when a strangely dressed, incredibly audacious, and undoubtedly talented girl was reading Shakespeare in a completely unique manner in the reception office of his alma mater. Oh, he knew that manner well. All those intonations, pauses, and inflections were perfectly familiar to him. The only thing that remained unclear was why his colleagues didn't immediately guess it. It would have been enough to bring in old recordings of his own performances, and there wouldn't have been a shred of doubt left. The timbre of the voice, the characteristic light trilling, everything matched down to the tiniest detail. Lord, could such a thing be possible? And those eyes he saw at the doorstep of his own apartment? Eyes now free from the colored contact lenses, revealing a wondrously rare color of hazelnut. Eyes that drove thousands of his female fans crazy. How could they not recognize them? There was no doubt left, and no need for sophisticated genetic analyses. She was his biological daughter. His and the young, lovely girl from the little seaside village. Ah, how he used to like her. He could have even married her if he hadn't been afraid she'd get him into some criminally punishable situation. He couldn't believe she was only 16 when they met. She already looked so mature. Juan closed his eyes and transported himself back to that distant May when he was young, full of strength, energy, and hope for a bright future. It wouldn't be fair to say that his hopes were not fulfilled at all. No, he achieved everything he dreamed of: success in his profession, recognition, fame, nationwide renown. Anyone could only dream of such things. But true love was never part of his life. Countless women, hordes of admirers, glowing press reviews, and letters used to come in by the dozens every day. However, now he felt that his once frenzied popularity was rapidly waning. New times, new idols. Who would stay with him when he became old and feeble? Because that was inevitable. Someday it would happen. We are all mortal. Irene, his last wife? All she cares about is her own career, and she'll drop him without remorse like a tired thing and won't even look back. She only married him hoping for influential connections in the showbiz world. Ah, every person, regardless of who they are or the level of their popularity, yearns for simple domestic warmth, unconditional love, the kind where you come home in the evening and someone is waiting for you, having homemade dinner. Not the kind of dinner the hired help prepares for pay, but simply because you mean something to someone. And he also wanted to see his legacy in this world, children, and finally grandchildren. He was partly pleased that he had a daughter and 2 grandsons. Thinking about all this, Juan felt a painful pang in his heart. Why did he drive her away from the audition? Is it shameful to have a daughter? Especially one so talented. A spitting image of him, no less. And even though she was illegitimate and bore a different surname, he would give her everything, absolutely everything, just to have her by his side. He got scared. Once again, he got scared. He needed to talk to her, invite her to a restaurant, get to know her properly. Why was he such a fool? Well, it's not too late yet. She's planning to stay in the capital and attend the theater school. He must help her, prove that he's worthy of being a real father. Returning to the capital at the end of August, Melania immersed herself in the lively student life. She was accepted into the theater school without exams, thanks to Sonora Nieto. After sorting out the paperwork, she went home to delight her parents, gather necessary belongings, and tell her mother all the details. When she returned, she began her new life with a completely different mood. Now she was a full-fledged first-year student at the acting department. She had no shame about the patronage she received. She felt her calling and knew she wouldn't let her benefactor down. "Melania, are you coming?" Her friends called out as they all rushed out of the school door for a lunch break at the nearest cafe. "Go ahead, girls, I'll catch up," she smiled at them and walked towards a man in a low-brimmed olive-colored hat and a high-collared coat, who waved to her and smiled timidly. "Hello, Melania," he said when she reached him. "Hi. What are you doing here?" She replied. "I came to see you. Maybe you'd like to talk closer. I feel deeply sorry about what happened, my daughter." Juan tried to take her hand, but she pulled it away and said sharply, "You had a chance, Dad, a great chance. But you didn't take it. You rejected me, not once but twice. You got scared, acted like a coward, call it what you want. Now I don't trust you, and I don't need your help. Let's stop any attempts at communication that neither of us needs. And if you're worried that anyone will find out about our little secret, let me assure you, I won't tell a soul. I don't need it. Now excuse me, I have to run," and she took a step away. "Wait." He still managed to grab her hand and held it tightly in his palm. "Don't rush to conclusions, please. Yes, I got scared. Yes, I acted like a coward. And not for the first time. But I want to be there for you, my daughter. I want to help you. Please, believe me. I don't need anything from you." She cut him off, broke free, and ran away. The school stage was set for the final performance. The hall was filled with relatives and close friends of the graduates, senior students, and teachers. Everyone was nervous. The poster's main role was given to Melania Aguilar, the rising star of theater and cinema. There was no doubt about it. During her studies, no one had any doubts about the versatile and brilliant talent of this fantastically hard-working young actress. She literally lived on stage, carrying on the best traditions of the old theater school. While still a student, she managed to star in several successful film projects and received numerous offers from leading directors, both domestic and foreign. She intended to stay within the walls of her alma mater, where the brightest prospects awaited her. In the front row sat the proud Sonora Nieto, parents of the rising star, her course's teachers, and other important guests. The hall was adorned with bouquets, filled with whispers and joyful anticipation. Finally, the final bell rang and the curtain rose. The actors took the stage, and the performance began. After the first act, the hall erupted with enthusiastic applause, and at the end, the actors couldn't leave the stage as the audience called for encores again and again. The stage was covered with flowers, camera shutters clicked everywhere, and cries of "Bravo! Bravo!" filled the air. As the applause began to subside, a man in a suit walked down the aisle from the back rows and approached the stage, holding a large basket of white roses in his hands. As the audience recognized him, they smiled. Some of the adult actors patted his shoulder and greeted him, while the students turned their heads with interest. When he reached the stage, he climbed the steps and walked to the microphone stand, placing the prepared basket beside it. The audience became attentive, and the young actors standing in a row, arm in arm, turned to each other and began whispering quietly. The man took the microphone in his hand and addressed the audience. "Dear guests, colleagues, and students. Today is a momentous and solemn day for everyone gathered here. But I won't bore you with formal speeches because I have a different, personal reason for this appearance." He paused and scanned the audience with his eyes. "Today, my beloved daughter performed in the lead role on this stage." An extraordinary excitement filled the hall, and Melania, standing apart, bit her lip, wanting to leave, but her partner standing beside her whispered something in her ear, and she reluctantly stayed. Yes, my friends, you heard correctly. "Melania Aguilar is my biological daughter, and I am incredibly proud of her," said the man, whom everyone present had recognized as Juan Parra. "And today, from this stage, I want to ask her for forgiveness for not being a true father to her, for not being there when she needed me, and especially for rejecting her when she finally came to me." The air in the hall seemed to stand still as Juan's heartfelt words hung in the air. Melania looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions, surprise, doubt, and a glimmer of hope. The audience watched in rapt attention as Juan continued. "For years, I let fear and insecurities guide my decisions. I couldn't face my past mistakes and failed to recognize the wonderful daughter I had. But today, as I witnessed her brilliant performance, I saw the tremendous talent, passion, and determination she possesses. I realized that I want to be a part of her life, to support and cherish her as a father should. Melania, if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I promise to be there for you from now on, to be the father you deserve." "I know there's no excuse for me, Melania," Juan said, turning to her while still holding the microphone. "But today, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just doing what I should have done long ago publicly, in front of everyone present. I acknowledge you as my biological daughter and sole heiress. Though the most significant inheritance you received without any documents is our family gift, the immense acting talent. My dear, you are 100 times better than me as an actress. I'm just a humble comedian who managed to achieve popularity. But you, and I am confident in this, have taken after your great-grandmother, the brilliant star of the early 20th century, Julia Arias Cruz, also known as Kant. Today, I am happy that her talent lives on in you, and I sincerely hope that our theatrical dynasty will continue. As for me, well, perhaps someday you'll take pity on your worthless father and introduce him to your children. Maybe I'll make a decent grandfather if I couldn't be a proper father." Juan, without hesitation in front of the audience, pulled out a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and wiped his moist eyes. He then approached his daughter and placed a basket of roses in front of her. "Congratulations, my dear, you truly achieved everything on your own." He smiled and walked off the stage, but after a couple of steps, he stopped and turned around, hearing from behind. "Wait, Dad." Melania stepped out of the line of her peers and approached her father. "Thank you," she said to him. "You know, maybe we'll become friends someday." The applause, the scene of family embraces, and the reunion of father and daughter finally finding each other surpassed all previous ovations. The hall erupted with excitement. Young actors surrounded the father and daughter in a tight circle, congratulating and encouraging them. Then Juan went off stage with them, and in the front row, a beaming Sonora Nieto was already giving an interview to a correspondent from one of the capital's newspapers. Yes, darling, it's all thanks to me. You must publish this thrilling story." Backstage, champagne was being opened, toasts were raised, and hopes for a happy future for all the characters in this play, directed by life itself, were expressed.